Hi everyone, and thanks for tuning into the very first episode of The F Word. My name is Deep, and I will be your host for these episodes. Now before I start talking about why I decided to start this podcast, let's play a game. I will give you a few clues, and you tell me who the celebrity is that I'm talking about. Ready? Let's play. Clue number 1. This hugely successful celebrity had an infamous sex tape scandal with another celebrity. The other celebrity is not that famous though. Clue number 2. This celebrity has 3 other siblings who are famous as well. 1 brother and 2 sisters. Clue number 3. And this is the final one. This celebrity has black hair. Did you get it? How many of you got Kim Kardashian? Well, you're wrong. I was actually talking about Colin Farrell. But the reason some of you thought about Kim K is precisely the reason why I'm doing this podcast. The F word is feminism. Now, I'm not going to preach to you about how our society hypothesizes women and any crack in that image proclaims them as harlots worthy of lifelong ridicule. I'm not going to do that. What I do want to know is how ingrained is this behavior in our psyche? Another motive for starting this series is to understand, as a man, how the same events differ in experiences just based on gender. Take, for example, getting up in the morning and deciding on what to wear. For me, at the risk of admitting my utter lack of fashion sense, I literally grab the first thing in my closet. However, for a friend of mine, who happens to be female, things like, is my bra showing in this? Would my boss take me seriously in this? Factor into the decision-making process. Now, I'm not saying that every man out there dresses like a vagabond like me, or even that every woman out there thinks like my friend. However, it is a concept that I feel deserves more consideration. My other main goal is to get men involved in the conversation, because like it or not, men play a big role in passing legislations, especially those concerning women. Keeping them out of the loop, in my opinion, isn't a successful strategy. People talk about this being the era of change. However, I disagree. I believe that this is the era of dialogue. If we successfully talk about how different groups in society have been shortchanged, then maybe, just maybe, we will someday come up with a way to make it a level playing field. The key is that successful dialogue. Now, before I go any further, I feel like I should provide a disclaimer. I am not a reporter or an expert on women's issues by any means. This means that I might at some point invariably say something that might not sit right with a few people. To the people listening to this, your criticism is highly appreciated. But more than my words, I would urge you to pay closer attention to the intent behind them. I'm a man trying to figure out how the patriarchy that I help establish is affecting the opposite sex. So sometimes, I might need you to give me the benefit of the doubt. Now let us begin. With my first episode, I wanted to start someplace that I am most familiar with. My work. I was curious to know if sexism in the workplace exists, and if it does, what does it look like? Here to help me figure that out is a colleague of mine, Alex Jones. Well, that's not really her name because she requested her identity be kept private. Alex has worked for over 20 years in industries like aerospace, manufacturing, etc. Industries that are pretty much male-dominated. Let's hear what she has to say. Hi, Alex. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you. Obviously, I've known you for a while, but for our viewers who don't, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work experience and where you worked and stuff like that?
Bit of a loaded question. I'm not sure what people are interested in knowing. Well, I'm a person in my mid-40s. I've worked pretty much since I was 15 years old. Experienced as much as possible, spent as much time being productive and capable as possible. And in terms of getting to know me, well, there's probably a lot there I could talk about and probably shouldn't, but hopefully through the questions that you're asking, there'll be some insights into what makes me tick a little bit. So I prefer that people infer for themselves what that sounds like.
Perfect. Now, you work for the aviation industry, the transportation industry, the manufacturing industry. I'm getting the sense that you worked very much in the predominantly male-dominated industry. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Okay, and how is that experience for you different, or was that different at all?
Well, it more or less was a happenstance type of an experience. I finished college doing a technical program, which I didn't set out to do. It just happened that way. It was a program that was available to me, and as a result of graduating, I got my first job in an aviation industry sector. I was pleased and delighted, not because I was working in a male-dominated industry. I was pleased because I was working with big machines and in a technical environment. And pretty much the bent of my work has been around building things and making things happen. The fact that an industry was male-dominated or not was an irrelevant detail to me. It didn't impact my work. My work was basically rooted in learning something and doing something really well and delivering something really well. At first, I was completely oblivious to a gender element in the workplace. And even today, I can't say that it's ever been a dominant issue. So hopefully I've answered the question. It just happened to be that way, and I got comfortable, I stayed comfortable, and I enjoyed it. And the times that I left a male-dominated industry to work in a female-dominated industry, I found as a person, I was less comfortable in a female-dominated industry and more comfortable in a male-dominated industry. And I found that interesting. Well, it's just, the focus is on the work and getting things done. It wasn't about being one way or another as far as my experience was concerned. If we got together as a group to discuss something, I enjoyed the fact, which was more aligned with my personality, that with a group of men, we just got to work. We made decisions. We got things sorted out. Everything else wasn't an issue per se. And maybe I was lucky in those situations. I found that in female-dominated meetings, and it's important to say that how things were at the beginning of my career versus how things are now, it was more about being more social, about talking, and you know, how is everybody doing? And not that I'm insensitive, I was prepared to make a decision and get work done. And everything else would come as a result of working well together, not getting to know each other first and then doing the work.
Yeah.
Getting to know each other after the work was done. And I found that in a male-dominated industry, not through a lack of sensitivity by any stretch, we got to do the work first, and that put us all on a level playing field.
What was the first experience when you realized that, hey, gender is important or somehow sneaks in?
I found it to be, I wouldn't say important or unimportant. I found it to be an excuse, if I can use those words. Whereas, say in my mid-30s, early on in my career, if I demonstrated a surprising degree of competence, a surprising degree of confidence, or a surprising degree of capacity to understand, learn, and not back down, that maybe an older gentleman might take exception to that. Or I found experiences where somebody treated me as if I was their daughter or their aunt, not as a person at work. For some reason, if you in my case where I demonstrated a confidence, a credibility, and a capacity to learn things, it's like, I don't know what to do with a young woman like that. I think it's less of an issue now than it was earlier on in my career, because there are far more outspoken women than there have ever been, which is great. But getting into an early stage of my career, starting in the early 90s, I found every once in a while that it was interesting if somebody tried to, pacify me. Dear, don't worry about that. You'll get it. And I would say, no, I get it. What do you want to do next? And that was that. I've been pet at work once. Somebody said, "There, pet," here, petted me on the arm and said, "Oh, there, that was a very good job." And I turned around and said, "Well, I don't recall having any kind of fur. Petting might not be appropriate." That leads me to think of times where I had to, I wouldn't say defend myself, but to get a message across. It was usually with humor. Yeah. I never confronted somebody directly in saying, that's sexism, that's feminism, you're just being a bossy man, or calling them some kind of profane word. I would, through humor, ask, is that really what, somehow I would disarm it that way.
your approach to using humor as a way to address these issues, was that something that's ingrained in your personality, or was that something that you had to figure out later?
I believe it's ingrained in how I look at life. I am not somebody that's inherently ready to argue or fight or bring any kind of negativity to a situation. I don't like how that feels. I'm not confrontational that way. Yeah. I believe in fight or flight with respect to being angry. It takes a couple of days to recover if I get angry. So I've never found that to be useful for me. Okay. I often envy people who get upset, get angry, and move on, and use that to position themselves in any relationship, male or female. But I can't do that. I find that just completely unproductive for me. Humor's always worked better. I prefer to see the light and the humor in things as much as possible. Yeah. And maybe that's a way of just, really not trying to engage in things seriously. Yeah. Because it's easier, but it's easier for me.
Now, let me ask you this. What was the most ridiculous thing your manager or a manager ever said to you?
You are standing too close to the president. You need to give him personal space.
President of the company?
Yes. And I thought, this was a female manager.
Yeah, that was my question, actually.
Not a male manager.
Okay.
And basically, because the person was my boss, I was, okay, I'll be more mindful of that.
Yeah.
However, what I perceived was this person didn't like that I had the nerve to go talk to the president.
Okay.
I perceived that this individual, for some reason, found that uncomfortable to her. I imagine that if he had a problem with that, he would have addressed it, walked away, ended the conversation. There would have been some cue that it was a problem for him. I found it interesting that she needed to define that to me. There's something, I think, in women in the workplace where if you are perceived as comfortable around men, that is not necessarily something they appreciate. And there's always a woman in the workplace that's comfortable around men.
Yeah.
Some people don't care, some people do. Some men care, some men don't. Some women care, some women don't. A lot of women still care.
How old were you, if you don't mind me asking?
I was 32, 33 years old.
And were you relatively new in the company at that time?
No, I'd already been there for 10 years. So it was an opportunity in a conference type of setting to say hello, and that's really all I did.
Well, actually, I have a question coming off of that experience. There's a predominant opinion that women don't help other women at work or in their professional lives. Have you ever found that to be true in your personal experience?
I wasn't aware of it in my personal experience until that particular instance. I also, I would say, refuse to acknowledge that and give it any breadth or air. And if I heard of that happening, I would help more. Could I have done better in my career thanks to other women? Early on in my career, I can't say one way or the other. I've been grateful to every person that's helped me do what I needed to do. I never really experienced it except that one time. And a lot of my career successes I attribute to my female colleagues and my counterparts and coaches and mentors. My personal experience doesn't support that women don't help each other, but I'm aware of it.
Have your mentors been mostly male or female?
Ironically, more female than male. I think the women I had the opportunity to work with cared about being mentors and mentoring other women. I had one male mentor, and that didn't work out really well because he just talked about himself. He didn't talk about the experience of leadership. He didn't talk about any of the things that were more holistic in terms of being a whole person at work.
Interesting. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. Actually, the elephant in the world at this point.
Elephants.
President Trump. What do you think the future of the feminist movement is going to be in these next 4 years under his leadership?
I actually think of him as a Harry Potter character in he who shall not be named. I believe and agree with Mrs. King saying that the label should be Republicans. So I'm not going to say who he is, because to me as a person, he's irrelevant. As a human being, he's just one out there in the billions that are on the planet.
Yeah.
As a Republican, I think what's happened is there's fuel in a fire that's been around for a really, really long time. I think it spurred a kind of defiance in all genders. What's very good to see right now is that it's not just women who are unhappy with what the Republican messages seem to be. It's men who are unhappy. It's men who are upset with how their wives are feeling and their daughters are feeling, their aunts and their uncles and their cousins and their nieces. I think it's workplaces that are looking at how perhaps a single movement, an ignorance, if you will, which is contrary to clarity, consistency, and credibility, it's rooted in ignorance, may impact the economy. I'm hoping people are thinking about that. So I think the next 4 years are going to be very, very interesting. I think there'll be an age of defiance and an age of awareness, much like we had in the 70s, the 60s even the 50s when women went to work and owned companies, which was, I'm thinking episodes of Mad Men there. I think there'll be change of some sort. It's hard to say where it's going to be because nobody predicted this day would happen.
You can say that again.
No one ever predicted this day would happen. I would like to see Hillary do things as an intelligent individual, not as a scorned woman. I would like women not to talk about other women in a way that's, oh, well, we saw that coming. I don't understand how women voted for a Republican person. I'm still reading about that. I can't sympathize yet, but the next 4 years, I think there'll be change. I think there'll be steps backwards, there'll be steps forward. I think en masse, though, women are united in a way that hasn't been seen in a really long time. I know that we're going to work on things as a collective a whole lot more and a whole lot differently than we've had in the last 4, the last 8, the last 16, 32, 64, and so on.
And what is your opinion of the Women's March?
My opinion of the Women's March, if it invoked one different thing to happen the next day, wonderful. If it gave people the indicator that when women step out of their roles, things change, things don't get done, that impacts our economy, that impacts our home life, that impacts something, it was a good march. If it's about just marching, we can all march. Without a consequence, though, I'm not sure how effective it would have been just to talk about, I went on a march. Well, did you come back the next day and do something different?
So you're saying at this point, doing something that initiates a conversation or just initiates a conversation is not enough?
I think it's a good start.
Okay.
I think it's a good start. If that conversation led a person to think differently and do something differently, like if somebody came back from the march and said, and I don't know because it hasn't come back to me, not to say that that's the benchmark or that's moving the needle. I haven't seen a change. One teacher I had in university expressed that a change only happens when it changes the daily lives of every individual. So if a woman, young or old or whoever, was in that march and through that they were encouraged to do something, like a Rosa Parks moment, like a voting moment, like the first woman in a medical college moment having the right to practice, then all these things are worth it. But we have to do them because maybe it takes thousands to get that one thing to happen.
Why do you think it has taken so long for the feminist movement to reach this stage?
I don't know if it's appropriate to say or to think of it in terms of a schedule. I think if you look at the sum total of everything that a feminist movement has to deal with, if we look at every woman that's successful today, it's an interesting thing to think about in terms of timeline. Maybe we're ahead of the curve, maybe we're not. But by what standard is to say that? Why is it taking this long? Maybe it's taken the perfect amount of time. Maybe it's now it matters most because the world is so different. Look at the woman that started a business who's successful. Look at the women today who are running really large firms. That when I started work was unimaginable. Unimaginable. And that's not too long ago. That's 25 years ago. So I think the timeline is right. I think because there's no benchmark to say that it isn't.
All right, now I'm going to read something to you that I think is very interesting. In January 2017, and I quote CNN's Laura Karan and James Masters, quote, President Donald Trump signed an executive action reinstating the so-called Mexico City policy, which bars international non-governmental organizations that perform or promote abortions from receiving U.S. government funding. Now, NGOs that offer or promote abortions as part of their family planning services will be prevented from receiving any assistance from the U.S. Agency for International Development, which is one of the largest contributors to international development assistance, unquote. What is your view on this whole pro-life, pro-choice debate?
My view is pro-choice. It should be no one's decision but an individual or a couple's decision as to whether or not they want a family or not. I don't believe government belongs in saying yes or no. I believe government belongs in funding health, in funding education and awareness. I think it's that kind of responsibility that the public should demand and what's best for the public, and push more of the onus on managing families and children and choosing the right things to individuals. And some people don't have a choice, and how do you help them? But to pass something unanimously like that as a broad sweeping legislation or guideline or regulation or whatever it is, I don't think in this day and age there's a place for it.
Coming off of that, on the topic of babies, our society puts, in my opinion, a lot of pressure on women in getting married and having babies. Have you ever encountered that pressure from society or anybody you know?
I've never had pressure to have a family. It was clear early on, even in my teenage years, that I didn't want children. I never sat down and talked to my parents about it. It just wasn't something that was even on the table. It wasn't until years later where there was an aunt that asked, why don't you have any children? There's always an aunt.
There's always an aunt.
There's always an aunt. You know, why don't you have any children? Because I don't want them. For many reasons, I don't want them. I just never saw myself as being a mom. I think my parents asked me once when I got into a relationship seriously in my early 20s, you know, are you planning on having children together? And the answer was no. Well, how come? Well, I just don't want them. Okay.
And that was that.
And that was that. It wasn't, oh, you know, something wrong, did something not work? And when I got together with that person, the first question was, you know, are you expecting to have children? Because if you are, I'm not the person.
Yeah.
We can't be together. I will not change my mind on that. And
but that is fair, because
absolutely. And every 5 years I would ask.
Yeah.
You know, have you changed your mind about children?
Yeah.
And as hard as it would be to leave the relationship, I was not interested in having. No, it just wasn't on the table.
Yeah.
So no, my parents didn't pressure me into having babies. I got a lot of questions from other people because they perceived that I would either be a good mother.
Yeah.
I was good around their kids, so I should have my own. It's easy to be good around other people's kids. You play with them, you go home.
An hour, yeah.
You bring them chocolate, you leave.
That's it.
They come and stay over at your house, then they get picked up, and away you go. Of course.
Yeah. You get to give them the sugar rush.
Right. And I actually enjoy being around children in that there's a pure conversation you can have at a certain age, and they're fun and they play and there are no rules, and I really enjoy that about having children. Now,
going back a little bit to one of the reasons why you worked in a predominantly male-dominated industry, I came across an interesting article, and I'll read you a little bit of it. A recent study performed by doctors Lynn, Leslie, and Simpian, professors from Princeton, NYU, and University of Illinois, concluded that girls surveyed between the ages of 6 and 7 think that men are inherently smarter in compelling numbers. However, the same girls at the age of 5 did not think so. Not only do they start thinking that women are not as smart as men, they also stop engaging in activities that they think are for smart people. Based on this, do you think sexism is a learned behavior? I mean, are we telling our girls from the age of 6 that they're not good enough?
I think we're not I don't think we're telling them they're not good enough. I think we're encouraging certain behaviors in young boys where they can conclude that they can't compete, and therefore that makes them feel like they're not good enough.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that this shift in their thinking is happening at a very specific point. It's not like they've made to eventually think like that in like over 3 years or something like that. They've discovered or they've found out that it's at a specific age, and I would have actually liked them to do the same study on the boys and see what they think. And but I just thought that was interesting. Yeah.
And the irony is that at a genetic DNA level, we're all female. There's code that's got to happen for a boy to become.
Really?
Yes. And I learned that a long, long time ago. So something in nature decides the population. It's not the population that decides the nature.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for your insight. We're actually nearing the end of our interview. What do you wish men would know?
I wish that men would realize that they don't have to be men as they know it. They're allowed to deconstruct. They're allowed to be different. They're allowed to engage with women the way they feel comfortable and take a risk with women to respond.
And what do you wish women would know?
Women would take more responsibility for themselves, know that they have an opportunity today that didn't exist before in working together and communicating, and not put pressure on themselves to be a woman or a gender or anything in particular. Dress the way you want to, be comfortable, eat what you want, work where you want, ask for what you need. And if somebody says no, ask why. Don't assume it's okay. There's no greater model out there. Don't watch reality TV. It's not reality. A Kardashian's not a real person.
What? They're not?
No, because, I'm sitting in this room having this interview. I don't see an entourage of 40 people making that person in the corner there look fantastic. I bet she looks fantastic all by herself.
Yeah.
It's not based in the way things happen. It's okay for entertainment value, but you can't be these other people. You have to be yourself. I still deal with this every single day because I wish for things too. I'm far, far from perfect. Far from hopeful with respect to, could I change things about me every day? But I snap out of it. I go home and I'm content with my home and I'm content with what I've accomplished as a person. Do I love everything that's happened in the way that's happened? Absolutely not. But tomorrow comes.
So you're saying you'd wish that women would question the status quo more?
Yes.
In their lives, in their work, in their relationships, everywhere?
Yes, and try. Now's the age to try. You might be surprised that you'll get farther than you think. And don't accept the relationship that doesn't help you. Don't accept the job that doesn't fulfill you, make you happy, and give you everything you're looking for in your work. Take small steps, make sure that the bigger picture makes sense. But it's not enough just to know one thing. And you have to adapt, you have to change, and there's no handout, and there's no, figure out a way to be flexible and to survive your day. And some days the phone's not going to be around. What are you going to do? We look for so much insight in things that are not close to us. It's a hard question to actually answer without coming across very judgmental about certain things. But if I think of my own opportunities, my life has been full of challenges. Yeah. Many challenges.
Yeah. Your advice is...
But you get up and you try. Yeah, you get up and you go and you be credible and you be consistent and you don't add to gossip and to BS and you don't post that crappy thing on Facebook. You stop it. I've never been told like I didn't come home and say, I got a job in an aviation company. And they're like, what do you think you're going to do there?
Yeah.
You're not smart enough to be there. I never had those messages from my family.
Yeah.
Never, never, never. And I think if you do have that in your family, then don't be the carrier of that message to your friends and to your future daughter. Break a cycle.
Interesting. And what do you wish I would have asked you that I didn't ask?
Would I like a drink?
Actually, now that you bring it up, it's a perfect segue.
What would you like to drink? I would not have asked for wine. I would have asked for scotch. I would say if I liked doing this, if I liked having this conversation, if I was comfortable having this conversation, I think it's a necessary conversation. Do you want the answer?
Yeah. Were you comfortable? Or?
No, I was completely uncomfortable because it forced me to think about things I don't really think about.
Exactly.
Because I just do what I do, and I'm fortunate. I can't imagine the experiences that people have reported, whether they were male or female in college, in a country. I read these things and I don't understand it because I haven't had the experience. So
what made you comfortable about this conversation?
That I wouldn't be the best example because I haven't experienced a lot of things people complain about or wonder about or express an opinion about with respect to gender inequality. Or I've just never given it any power or any cred. I do think I would have done better if I was a male in a male-dominated industry. I did have a situation once where somebody said, if you were a man, you would have been promoted.
Yeah. But
did that defeat me? Did it make me stop working hard? No, I just went, okay, I'll move to another department. If somebody doesn't value me or appreciate me, or if the opportunity's not there, I've just shifted. I've removed myself from the situation to, okay, do without me. Somebody better can do the job. Okay.
And that is exactly why I want to have this conversation, because women out there are going through the same experiences as you are. I know you don't think that you're the perfect example, but in a way you are, because you have been through those experiences where the fact that you're not a man, you were given the shorter end of the stick. But what is different in your experience, and what I would like to point out, is you questioned it and you moved and you made it a consequence. You made...
Yes.
And
yes,
that
would be
that
true.
is exactly what I want to point out, because there are a lot of women out there who are just stuck in the same situation complaining about it because they don't want to make a consequence of it. And I think that is what I would like to talk about, because I come from a part of the world where gender plays a much bigger role in your everyday life than in North America does. So complacency has, in my opinion, been the biggest drawback of this movement. And that exactly what we need to do. That is exactly what we need to do now.
Yeah.
Create a consequence.
Well, and I think that's a good point. I haven't been complacent.
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah. If I didn't see an opportunity to do better, to do more, to be more helpful, and not helpful because that's what a girl does or that's what a woman does. I haven't stayed in a place to convince the person, you need to promote me. I didn't stay in a relationship to convince the individual that I'm lovable or capable. It's been hard to leave these things, and there's been damage for sure. But I haven't stayed in jobs where I couldn't be productive and couldn't apply my entire toolkit of work experience to the best work possible because it was good for the firm, it was good for the product, it was good for the business. Not because I held a position, it's because it's important to do good work. And if I didn't find myself doing good work, I went to find other work. And through that sum total of experience, I believe I'm wonderfully employable. But the flexibility's been on my part to accept the fact, no, I can't go further here, which is not a defeat per se, depending on how you think about it. It's an opportunity to move on and take what you've gained with you. There's a loss when a person leaves a role. Whether you were super at it or a little bit good at it or somewhat good at it or even not good at it, I took my experiences with me to the next best experience. I own that responsibility. I didn't stay back and say, I'm convinced that person, oh, look how I can be, and then meet that expectation. There's a point where you don't meet an expectation, and there's no point wasting the energy and time. Just go. Women need to make that decision to shift, and it's okay to shift.
Yeah.
And whatever the consequence is going to be, easier in North America than in other parts of the world, I realize.
Yeah. You'll
be okay.
And I think what I would also like to point out is that there's no one set way of challenging.
No, exactly.
There are many, many different ways. Like maybe not everybody wants to leave their job because they really love it, but they're just not okay with how they're being treated, or they want more responsibility. So make that a priority, make yourself indispensable in a way. But
to yourself. So one of the things that I've thought about, it's wonderful to be in one position and make a certain salary, and people are like, well, I don't want to leave that job because it pays well.
Yeah.
I've had a position where maybe I'll leave a job because it pays well. And I may not get another job that pays that well, but I will do 3 jobs. I would do 4 jobs. I got through college that way.
Yeah.
Right? I paid for school. I took a lot of jobs and did my workload. Could I have been a better student? Sure. But
that was just
I supported myself, and I've done that for a really long time.
Yeah.
So this notion that, you come out of a place, university or school, and then you're in a place for a long time. The world of work doesn't work that way. The days of being in a firm for many, many years don't exist. With respect to not just gender issues, but if you look at generational issues, with the advent of technology, work has changed.
Yeah.
And we're seeing a huge shift, not just feminist gender issues and male versus female issues. Work, which has been one of the biggest social constructs out there, regardless of where you come from, is changing. It's just changing. It's a virtual world, and it's a close world. I think men and women are equal now, in that sense, where I'm in a room full of developers. It's not male-dominated anymore.
Well, no, it isn't. But in a way, they're not equal yet, because women
still aren't being paid the same.
Women will earn an average of $1 million less than a man by the time they reach retirement age. So they're not quite equal.
Yeah. But I think with the 20-somethings that are working in workplaces I've been in the last 10 years, that argument goes away.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, a developer is developing no differently than the other.
Exactly.
I think the disparity is still going to be in the leadership roles and how women are perceived running a group versus men. I think that's true. And I think it still exists within my generation and upward. I can't say for how a 30-something manages a group. I've never reported to a 30-something. Maybe next year I do report to a 30-something.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of variables out there around that. But I think women need to be aware to go do the work in terms of do what you need to do for yourself, not for somebody else. And if that takes 2 or 3 jobs and some different kind of sacrifice, that's because your life matters, not because you're a girl. It's because your life matters.
Fascinating. Well, Alex, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. I have learned so much from you, and I can't thank you enough. Thank you very much for coming.
It's been a pleasure to speak to you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Well, that's it for the first episode of The F Word. I'd like to thank our guest Alex Jones for her candid responses, and my friend Ismat Korsani for helping me produce this episode. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated with our future episodes. And you can follow us on Twitter with @TheFword11. Thanks for tuning in.